I'm in a little bit of a better mood. Because I'm back on the air doing what I love. Yes, I'm still having the retrogradation problems, but so what? It's gonna be like that. Okay, listen. It inspired me to talk about, the issues going on. Because listen, I got hard hit. We've been hard hit. You know, what can we do? Nothing but to grim and bear it. So this retrograde, all these retrogrades, and then this eclipse that we got to two of them, in 1 month, and they come in pairs. The lunar eclipses come in pairs, and we're due for two more on the same sign down the road. And that takes care of Aquarius Leo eclipses for the year until they repeat themselves next year. Right? The dials in the heavens are the same. You just gotta know the cycle. If you know the cycles, it becomes easier. I knew the retrograde was coming. Weeks, I knew it was. Virgos, especially with my Mercury Ascendant, we feel it at least a week or a week and a half. And I'm like, oh my God, let me hold on. When I started to lose my actors, my issues with the theater, and then the closing down of the venue because of tax evasion and the liquor license, a major venue in New Jersey, that money lost on advertising, salaries, all these things are just destructive forces when the planet slows down in its rotational speed, which is what we call Mercury retrograde. Understand that it's not really Mercury that's going backwards. It's an apparent observation. The reality is that our planet slows down in its orbital speed on its axis, and it gives the illusion that the other planets are moving backwards when it's really the Earth moving further behind the other planets, not in its orbit around the sun, but in its rotation. This rotation slows down. Okay, and that's what's really happening on a retrograde. To be mathematical about it. That doesn't make it any easier, which is why radio waves and waves don't work. They become interfered. Because if you understand anything about radio waves, they follow a specific frequency. And it's contingent upon that speed of that frequency. And if it slows down, if any of the mathematical algebraic components can compromise, that might cause the slowing down of the speed or speeding it up. Thank God our Earth doesn't speed up. Otherwise, we'll be flying out, and bits of the planet, especially our oceans, will be flying out into space. So thank God that our planet is not speeding up. But it does slow down in its axis. And that is the phenomenon behind the retrograde. Both of Mercury, Venus, and all the other planets, including Mars. None of them are moving backwards. It's the Earth that's moving or slowing down in its orbital speed. So now that I've mentioned that, let's talk about how each individual planet affects you in the horoscope. Okay? And I need to start talking about, so I'm going to talk about Saturn because this is about Saturn. Saturn inspired me to do this because of the heavy afflictions, which I can't seem to get out of easily. So I'm going to have to grim and bear it. We cannot fight Saturn. So let's start with the moon. Again, like in part 1. Now, understand that you have 12 astrological houses. 12 astrological houses. Now, what do the houses mean? Well, if it's the first house, we're dealing with the personality of the person, the ego of the person's environment, the person's outlook. But more important than that, the ascendant or the first house, because that's another name for the first house, is the ascendant or the rising sign. The first house is a division in space of 12 houses in space. As above, so below. These houses represent different departments of our lives. Okay? And that is where the astrology, mundane astrology, and even personal natal astrology becomes important. It's not so much the planets and the signs, it's the houses. The houses of the zodiac, of each individual birth chart, really defines the arena the platform on earth of where everything is to take place. Taking your kids to school, taking your kids to the doctor, okay? You going to work, okay? All of that is defined by the houses. And in specific graphic detail. So I'm going to attempt to do that today. The first house, like I said, is the house of the personality, the ego. And more important than the internal outlook of the person, depending on the sign that sits in the first house, is the appearance of the person. How the person appears to others and what they want to show to others versus what they don't want you to know about you. Okay? The first house is the house of the personality, the expression of the personality, the ego. Okay? So, in the first house, if you have Libra in that house, you're going to be, well, before I go into, well, now I'll give a few examples. If you have Libra in the first house, cause there's going to be something attractive and pleasant and beautiful about you. Something symmetrical and refined. Or maybe not. You might have Libra afflicted in the first house. An affliction means that the sign in the first house is not working well. It's bombarded by too many hard aspects. Or you might have a planet there that doesn't fit with Libra, that clashes with Libra. And that's another additive of personality and ego onto the ascendant. So the ascendant really describes your psychological behavior, how you appear to others, how others see you from the outside looking in, and what you want people to see about you versus what you don't want them to see. So the first house is also like the mask. It is the mask. We hide behind the masks of the ascendant. Okay? I dress like sometimes I do look like a Libra. You know, I wear nice clothes, jewelry. I have the overbite, the famous Libra overbite. You know, perfect teeth, symmetrical teeth. You know what I'm saying? That's very Libra. You know, with the cheeks and the G-clef. You just can see it because I have a beard now. All that is Libra on the ascendant. But if it's Scorpio on the ascendant, then it's about the eyes. The eyes. You see the intensity in the eyes. And that's when you know that you're looking at a Scorpio. But then again, it might not be so obvious. Scorpio can go under the radar if he's on the ascendant. So his eyes might be gentle and sweet and nice. You know, he won't have the classical Libra smile or bite. But he most certainly will be intense. He might wear black clothing, or she might wear black clothing. Be quiet and moody and broody. Not speak much, but listen quite a bit. Sit in a corner of a room and observe everybody and be watchful. Mysterious. They say a lot by saying nothing and accomplish everything by saying less. So that could be Scorpio on the ascendant. It could be Sagittarius. Look at Wendy Williams. Wendy Williams is a Cancer. But if you look at her and her teeth, people say that she look like a drag queen. You know why they would say that about her? Because she's tall. She got wide hips. You have seen her hips? Tall, feature. You know, she looks like the same to a half man, half horse. Wendy Williams has Sagittarius on the ascendant, which explains her love of broadcasting and journalism, which is very typical Sagittarian professions. And Wendy Williams makes it known that she's done broadcasting and been interested in broadcasting and TV and her whole life. In my high school yearbook, I wrote down that I want to be a broadcaster, a writer, and I became those things. And I have Mars, the planet of action and activity, in Sagittarius, in the third house of communication. Isn't this a form of communication through broadcasting? Doesn't have to be the actual network. It could be a TV or YouTube. It's the same broadcasting principle of it. So this is again the ascendant. The second house represents more internalized structures, not so openly. It's more psychological than more physical, but it does have its physicality. You in the second house describes your income, your money. How you gonna make money in this life? How you going to make an income, earn a living? How much money you gonna make in one lifetime? Will you be rich? Will you be poor? Will you be middle class? But the second house defines more than just that. It also defines how you feel about yourself, your sense of self-esteem and sense of self-worth. The higher the self-esteem and the self-worth, the higher the income. They go hand in hand. The second house defines your value systems, what kind of values you cherish about yourself, and what tradition you want to follow concerning your upbringing and your family. No. What is it that becomes valuable to you and important and significant? That which shapes your ego, shapes the rest of who you are and what you are about to be or become. Okay. The second house rules how you feel about yourself, the value index that you give yourself. Are you worth $100 or $1,000,000? And if you do you act like it? Because if you don't act like it, then you're not going to bring that to your vibration. So, the second house is the house of uh, resources, not just material possessions, because the second house also determines how much or what material possessions you're going to have and in what capacity. Okay? Are you going to be the type of millionaire that has homes all over the place? Or are you going to be someone like in New York City? We have many millionaires in New York City walking around. You would never know it. They dress so casually because the rich have no one to impress. So they don't have to do all that regalia. That's how you know people who profess to be rich and flaunt it really don't have that money. But those who have broken holes in jeans and even broken sneakers and look like bums, those are the ones with the millions. Because there's a certain psychology that comes with money. And that psychology is going to be determined by the upbringing and the shaping of the value system that will determine if you even deserve to have that kind of money or have that job that can present you with that kind of money. So that's one internal resource. The other one is having a strong constitution of self. Can you be who you are without the money, without the looks, without anything else, and just on pure value system? So the second house can bring you into the core essentials of who you are. If you're not happy with you, then you can certainly not be happy with anybody else. And these indexes are determining that house, the second house, which belongs to Taurus. The first house, of course, naturally belongs to Aries. So now the third house. The third house is the house that deals with communication. It deals with your brothers and your sisters, your aunts and uncles, cousins, second cousins, third cousins, your neighbors next door, your neighbors in the next building or the next house. Okay, the mailman, the milkman, the construction worker down the street. All of that is determined by the third house. The daily happenings around you, either around your neighborhood, around the neighborhood of your children's schools or your job. The environment. The immediate environment is determined by the third house. It is the house of the environment. What's happening in the environment? It also rules communication. Written and oral, and also non-written oral, like sign language. All of these things are determined by the third house. It rules the roads, the highways, the local streets, street corners, anything that's outside of the house or outside of the building, in the neighborhood, in the immediate neighborhood. is determined by the third house, the house of the environment, the house of Gemini. And then you have the fourth house. And the fourth house is the house of the home and the family. Your mother, your father, your grandmother, your grandfather, and even your greats. Even the altar, the ancestral altar. It is also it rules the mother experience, the woman experience, children. Not children like in the fifth house, which is teenagers, but like little ones, Ubers. Okay, the fourth house is a very maternal house. It rules foundation, not just foundation of a home and a family, but also a foundation of a business. Because Cancer, the opposite polarity, remember, it's Capricorn. So Cancer, like Capricorn, is also a sign of great industry. So the fourth house will reflect that as well. So whatever sign is in the fourth house will take a color of the cardinality of Cancer. You know, and will make that sign in that house quite active. Just like whatever sign is on the ascendant, whether it's a cardinal sign or not, the first house belongs to Aries. It's a cardinal house. So that's going to bring attention to you, or you bring attention to it, right? The fourth house also rules unfinished business. Unfinished business of a karmic nature. Remember, Cancer lies below the wheel while Capricorn is above the wheel, right? So anything that's below the wheel represents the subconscious, while any planets that are above the wheel represents consciousness. Okay? Uh, I will do a better illustration by putting it in a diagram. An illustration is always best. Okay. You have consciousness and subconscious, right? And consciousness. Okay? I don't know if you can see that. You have consciousness. Planets that are found above the wheel expresses consciousness. Planets that go below the wheel is the subconscious. So here are the four cardinal points: Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. So the fourth house also rules the immediate past life. If you want to know the immediate past life that took place, look at the fourth house. The fourth house gives clue as to what happened in the last life before you were born into this life. It's a very important house. It's a cardinal house. It is the house of the subconscious. There I get to find out who you really were in a past life and what you're bringing with you in this one. And do you have unfinished business? And most likely, if you have this house populated by planets or personal points, the question becomes what kind of common unfinished business you're bringing into this current life. Very important house. It is a cardinal house of Cancer. Right? So then we have the fifth house. The fifth house belongs to Leo. So in this house, we have the house of gambling addictions, speculations like the stock market, speculative ventures, venture capitalism. It rules adolescents, teenagers. It is the house of Leo. It rules games and amusement parks like Dorney Park, uh, Hershey Park, Six Flags, Asbury Park, theme parks, or if you go to the Midwest and you see these Ferris wheels, where the clown or the circus comes to town, that's a very Leo activity. It's time to act, dance, do tricks. It rules the theater. Okay? We all know that, right? Leo rules the theater, both house and sign. So it also rules the procreative forces of man. Man's ability to make love to his wife, or she make love to her husband. The pleasures of the bedroom are ruled by this house. Even though Scorpio is the sign of sex, the sign of lovemaking really belongs to Leo. The fifth house of procreation and the procreative forces. Okay? The sixth house. The sixth house rules health, illness, sickness. Food and food preparation, it rules medicine. It is the house of health. So whatever sign falls on this house will give a clue as to what kind of illness you have, or what kind of illness you're going to be bringing into this incarnation. And when will it strike? When will it awaken? All of that stuff is determined by the sixth house. Servants fall into this house. Domesticity falls into this house. Washing the dishes, cleaning the floors, washing the laundry, doing the laundry, the mundane. Detail work, because this house not only does it rule the health and hygiene, it also rules the workforce. The workforce, of course, being the labor force. It represents blue collar work, whereas the 10th house represents white collar work. Okay? That's the sixth house. Then we have um, the seventh house. The seventh house rules relationships, all kinds of relationships, platonic relationships, intimate relationships, business relationships, partnerships and fiduciaries, mergers, not among individuals, but also among companies and corporations. It is the house of cooperation, the house of marriage, commitment and partnership, whether through marriage or through the merging of business dealings. It is the house also of open enemies. So whatever sign falls on this house will give a clue as to who your enemies are, or what type of disposition your enemies have. Yeah. So it also rules all kinds of relationships that deal with the not self. So if you're the type of person that is a negotiator and an arbitrator, then you will be able to enjoy the position of the seventh house, whatever sign falls in it, because it's a house of cooperation, of checks and balances. It checks and balances the sign that's on the first house, because not only do the houses have significant meanings in and of themselves, they also have meanings towards each other. When they are against each other, that also bears a significance. Now, we're going to take a pause for a moment here and jump and talk about Saturn and the earth element. Saturn in Virgo make you quite a worker, quite a methodical worker, to the point where if you don't work 24/7, and I mean literally 24/7, then you're not happy. My partner Emery has Saturn in Virgo, and he's a workaholic. I'm like, ugh, total workaholic, great ethic. But then with Saturn in Virgo, you can be extremely critical, because Virgo is a critical sign. And to have Saturn in Virgo can make you a bitch of a critic. Say things you are not elicited to say. You give advice where advice is not asked of you to give. You know, um, Judgmental, even a bigot. All these can fall under Saturn in Virgo, where the person might think better than he is, because he may have a better work ethic or efficiency that reflects that. You can still be a jerk and be the most astute worker. I'm not impressed by it. Saturn in Taurus is in its detriment, and it's worse because Saturn in Taurus will strip you of your money, strip your material resources, tangible assets or intangible assets. It will make you bare. You have to base your sense of self-esteem and sense of self-worth by, how can I put it, by hold on, hold on one second, I get a call. Yes, hi, how are you? Bien, haciendo un video un momentito. So yes, this is what I'm saying. When Saturn afflicts a Taurus, it's terrible, but it works well in Capricorn in its dignity, and we're done with Earth.